The Kenyan budget has more than doubled in President Kenyatta's tenure, from just below 1.5 trillion shillings in President Kibaki's final year to the current more than 3 trillion shillings in Kenyatta's final full-year budget. As he prepares to leave office in August next year, Kenyatta's Treasury is proposing to spend 1.92 trillion shillings at the National Executive, representing 65% of the budget. This is an increment from the current financial year's allocation. Parliament will also register a marginal growth to settle at 37.8 billion shillings, while the judiciary could lose about 80 million shillings to receive 17.91 billion shillings. County governments have been allocated 326.5 billion shillings as equitable share, just 10 billion shillings more than the current year. In last year's debate of a new revenue sharing formula, an agreement amongst President Kenyatta, governors and senators settled that for a new revenue sharing formula to take effect, allocation to counties would be raised to 370 billion shillings to ensure no county lost any share. While some county allocations have been moved from conditional grants to unconditional, that only raises the share to 343.9 billion shillings. This means it will take longer for counties with higher population from the 2019 census to reap the benefits of the new formula. In the 3.02 trillion shilling budget, the National Treasury seeks to complete ongoing projects and also finance shared projects funded by donors and the government. The budget policy statement cites intent to foster recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and finance the Big Four agenda. With 2021 likely to be a referendum year, the National Treasury is seeking to allocate IEBC 10 billion shillings extra. Should the referendum be held beyond June this year, then the 10 billion shillings could be part of financing IEBC's estimated cost of a 10 billion referendum. But comparison with the election year budget of 2017 shows gaps. The budget policy statement has proposed 21.2 billion shillings for the electoral body. In 2017, 31.5 billion shillings had been allocated in the financial year for an election that cost a total of 54.1 billion shillings spread between 2016 and 2018. Should the cost estimates remain consistent in next year's polls, IEBC may require supplementary budgets or reviews before the final budget is enacted. One of the biggest concerns during President Kenyatta's tenure has been the rise in public debt. As of November last year, the public debt stood at 7.2 trillion shillings, almost equally split between domestic and external sources. By June this year, that figure could rise to 7.6 trillion shillings. In the 2021 budget policy statement, the National Treasury seeks to plug a budget deficit by borrowing another 937 billion shillings. That could push the public debt to 8.6 trillion shillings by June 2022, just 400 billion shillings shy of a debt ceiling of 9 trillion. But the ceiling was to take the country to June 2024. This means the National Treasury could return to Parliament to request for review of the ceiling. It was only raised just over a year ago. When President Kenyatta took the reins of power, the public debt stood at 1.79 trillion shillings in March 2013. While it stood at 7.2 trillion shillings in November last year, it will have grown by 6.8 trillion shillings by June next year to hit 8.6 trillion shillings. That's an average of 750 billion shillings per year, or nearly 500% growth. While the borrowing may be justifiable based on intended projects, majorly infrastructural, it is the cost of borrowing that is of concern. 10 years ago, the country's debt structure had 66% of borrowing from multilateral organizations, 30% bilateral, meaning between Kenya and single countries. Commercial loans were only 4% and have grown more than 6.5 times to stand at 31%, an expense that taxpayers will continue to shoulder as long as the debt structure remains, with the economic performance hampered by shrinking revenue sources and the ravaging pandemic that COVID-19 is. Parliament will consider the budget policy statement before the National Treasury presents budget estimates based on the policy media. Sam Kituko, Citizen TV, Nairobi.